Azure AI Studio provides the capability for you to quickly try out text moderation. The Moderate Text Content tool considers several factors such as the type of content, the platform's policies, and the potential effect on users. You can run moderation tests on sample content, configure filters to rerun and further refine the test results, and add specific terms to the block list that you want to detect and act on. In this demo, we'll demonstrate the basic functionality of running a simple test and how you can configure the filters and adjust the harm category threshold levels to suit your needs. To learn more about harm categories and severity levels, visit aka.ms/harm-categories. Text moderation involves a three-step process. Within the Simple Test tab, we begin by either selecting one of the samples provided or by typing our own. I'll use some customer feedback from the Contoso camping store. The statement insists that the camping stove was fantastic, easy to use, and overall a great product. This is a fairly positive statement which shouldn't trigger any of the filters. For now, we'll keep all harm categories enabled and set their respective threshold levels to medium. Next, we'll run the test and view the results. As I suspected, the content is allowed and the severity level is safe across all categories. But what were to happen if we tested a harmful statement? I have a statement from another customer who's dissatisfied with the tent they purchased. While it's okay to dislike a product, we don't want to condone any name-calling or degrading statements. If we test the content and leave the harm categories and threshold levels as is, the content is still allowed. However, this time we have a low severity level for hate. Ideally, we'd like for this sort of language to be blocked, and so far the text moderation tool was able to identify the general hate speech. What we can now do is try lowering the threshold level for the hate category to low, which would block any content that has a low, medium, or high severity judgment. When we now run the test, the content is blocked, and the tool informs us that the content was rejected by the filter in the hate category. If we didn't have the hate category enabled and ran the test, the content would be allowed. However, despite no longer filtering for hate content, the tool still annotates in the results that the severity level for hate is low. What's helpful to note here is that the text moderation tool continues to provide moderation across all categories, regardless of whether the category is enabled. The tool can also detect harm across multiple risk categories. I have here another customer review, which includes both hate and violence. The customer shares a harmful story which resulted in stealing a Contoso tent from a nearby camper. Let's test whether the model detects the harm for both categories. I'll set the threshold levels to medium and run the test to evaluate the content. The results indicate that the content is blocked and was rejected by the filter in the violence category. However, notice that the severity level for hate is low. This result is an indication that the model detected hate at a low level within the customer review. That is likely attributed to the statements about women being stupid. Since we don't want to condone the use of hate speech in customer reviews, we can adjust the threshold level for hate to low and validate whether the content can also be rejected by the hate filter. After running the test, the results indicate that the content is blocked and was rejected by filters in both the hate and violence categories. The model can detect harm across multiple categories, and we're able to adjust the threshold levels to suit our use case. Let's now try a customer inquiry with spelling errors. Here I have a customer who expressed that an incident occurred with their camping cooker and that they'd like to know how to clean the device. Among the various spelling errors, notice the spelling of BLOD for blood, which I suspect may trigger the moderation detection tool for harm. Let's set the threshold levels to medium and run a test to evaluate the content. Although the content is allowed, the severity level for violence is low. If no harm was detected, then the severity level for all categories would be safe. However, this result is an indication that the model detected violence at a low level within the inquiry. How can we be sure that the word blood, or BLOD, is causing the violence detection? Let's do another test, but this time we'll correct the spelling for blood and keep the threshold levels at medium. As the results indicate, the content is allowed and the severity level is still low for violence. Let's take our test one step further and remove the blood reference altogether and validate whether the usage of the term in both its correct and incorrect spelling is causing the model to detect violence. With the reference of blood removed, the content is not only allowed, but the severity levels are safe across all categories. I can assume that both BLOD and blood were the triggers for the detection tool. To get started with text moderation, visit ai.azure.com.